The streets will never make you grow. It's not a seed, it's a gutter. There's no happy endings in this life. So this is my message to you. The streets will never love you back. Hey guys, well, another day together. I got a special guest today. You're really gonna love her and adore her. I actually just got to know her. She's really special, and she has a spirit to her, so you're gonna like her a lot. And before I get into that, let me give a couple shout outs to you guys. Boston J, my moderator. Live and Let Live. Jaitano Bracco, Kelly Bala, Stephen Schumberg, Margaret Hearn, William Pizzelli. To all you guys, thanks for showing up. I truly appreciate it. Now, the person I have today, her father was the boss of the Genovese Crime Family. His name was Vincent Gigante. Now, I'm sure you all heard of Vincent Gigante. He was notorious. He made his bones back in the day with Vito Genovese. And so I'm going to put her on, Rita Gigante. And she also is the co-author of The Godfather's Daughter. So let's talk to Rita. Hi, Rita.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you, honey? Thank you for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's great to have you, and thank you for having, for you coming on. I truly appreciate it. And I hear an echo.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what that is.
I think that's on your end.
My speakers are on. You still hear an echo?
Let's see. I think you're good.
Okay.
Hey guys, do you have an echo in there? Okay, I think we're good. So I see a couple of people saying, "Wow, Jim, top-notch guest."
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is a special night tonight to have you on here. Your father was the boss of the Genovese Crime Family, and I could only imagine what kind of father he was. I'm sure he was a great father, because I spoke to you, and you have a lot of integrity, and the little time I got to know you, I could tell that you're very classy.
Thank you.
I'm a little nervous about this interview tonight. I'll tell you the truth, and nobody makes me nervous. So I want to start this interview with, where was your father born?
He was born in Manhattan. He was born to my grandmother, Yolanda, and Salvatore Gigante. My grandmother came from Italy on the boat with probably a million other people. And she had 6 sons, but one passed at a very young age, who was actually the first Vincent. And he died at a very young age. And so then when she had the next child, she named him Vincent, and that was my father.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, his parents, tell me a little about his parents.
So my grandfather was a jeweler when he came here. My grandmother was a seamstress. But when they lived in Italy, my grandmother was studying to be a pharmacist. They were wealthy in Italy. They lived in Naples in a town called Santa Lucia. And they were very well-to-do. They had servants. My grandmother was very big on education. And it's an interesting backstory. I'll share it with you guys. This whole thing actually began in Italy. We'll fast forward to my father in a minute, but My great grandfather, my grandmother's father, was a pharmacist, and he had a pharmacy in Santa Lucia, and people adored him. He was just a great man. And my grandmother was following in his footsteps. And unfortunately, he witnessed something from the Black Hand, which, if someone doesn't know this, it is the mafia in Italy. And they did things very differently in Italy than they do here. So uh, the Black Hand approached my grandfather and said, if you stand trial with this, we're going to come after you, your whole family. And he knew he was done for if he did anything. But to honor himself and his family and to protect them anyway, he just decided he was going to poison himself. So he used what was called strychnine back then, and that was poison, and he ended up killing himself. And then my grandmother met my grandfather, and he wanted to come to the United States because his most of his family was here. All his brothers were here already. And so my grandmother felt like her whole path got changed, and she agreed to come. And they came with nothing, even though my grandmother was wealthy in Italy, and my great grandmother wanted to, send her with money. She would keep sending her money, but my grandmother's like, I made my bed. I need to kind of sleep in it now. She made that decision to come here, and she's a proud woman, very smart, very wise. They came here and they ended up having 6 children. And my father was third in line out of the 6, because the first Vincent had passed in Italy. Actually, he was very young, and he pulled a boiling pot of water on top of himself.
Wow.
And they had him in the hospital and everything, but he ended up passing not long after. So my grandmother came back heartbroken. She actually lost 3 sons before she passed.
Wow.
It was a long, very tough life for her. And at some point, she actually would have passed before her sons. And they were young. The kids were young. She had a blood poisoning, and they didn't think she was going to make it. And she actually had an apparition of the Blessed Mother asking her to please. She prayed to her constantly. That was her go-to, and Saint Rita, who I was named after. And so the Blessed Mother actually came to her and granted her what she wanted. She said, let me just be with my kids. I want to see them grow up. Please let me live. That's all I want. Because she was hearing them separate the children. Like, this one's going to go with this one, because my grandfather had 5 brothers, so they were going to separate the children. And my grandmother was devastated. So after she saw the Blessed Mother and all of that happen, they were able to actually heal her. And she ended up living to 95. But she experienced so much heartbreak in those 95 years, and then finally passed. So it was a long road for her.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. My condolences, of course. And your father, now, he was a notorious guy in New York City. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows Vincent the Gigante. He was clever like a fox. He was a lion. He didn't take no bullshit from nobody, and people were scared of death to him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you mentioned his name, it was like a death sentence. So people would address him like this. They would just touch their chin.
Right.
You could never mention his name. If his name was set on a wire, he'd probably have you killed quick.
Right.
I mean, he believed in that life, because I'm sure he lived that life since a little boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably started around 14. He was running his own game, rap game, whatever he can do, he would do. I mean, they grew up poor. My grandfather didn't do very well, being a jeweler. My grandmother would kill herself, being a seamstress. So he grew up not but he loved to box. He loved to box. They got him into boxing. He wasn't even supposed to be in because he was too young. But of course, they were able to get him in, and he did very well for himself. But once he kind of fell into the hands of Vito Genovese, Vito loved him. Vito loved him, and um, he was very well liked, and my father, because he was very charismatic. He was just, a nice guy, and people really took to him very easily. So Vito did, and kind of took him under his wing, and he began driving for him, and all kinds of stuff. And my father saw an opportunity, to give his family, his mother and his father, and a different life. Um, so looking back on it now, I there's parts of me that definitely understand that, and parts of me that know, deep down, if you're going to live that life, you don't have children in that life, So, but nonetheless, I'm glad I'm here because I'm here to help people. So it turned out to be what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, your book, The Godfather's Daughter, Love, Healing, and Redemption.
Redemption. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a catchy phrase, love, healing, and redemption. So it says a lot about you.
Yeah.
Also, like, it's an amazing story how, like, Vito Genovese, like, saw this kid, Vincent, and put him underneath his wing. And back in the day when you were growing up, like, I grew up around all tough kids.
Right.
I was born in '69. I mean, I know the generations before me were a lot tougher because growing up, they were hanging out in pool halls, and you had to be tough.
Right.
And they were hurting people and killing people at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were taught, because New York City back in those days, it started with gangs, and then it
Mm-hmm.
turned to the families. But how was he as a father?
So, he was very much caught up in that life. That family, in essence, came first, and then I came so far after everybody because my oldest sister is 70 years old. I'm 55. So she's got almost 16 years on me. And, I came 10 years after the last child. So I was almost like, an only child in a sense, because three out of the, five of us were out of the house already. I was an aunt at the age of 6, so um, to my other siblings, he was a different dad. He wasn't as caught up, in the life as he was when I came. So they got him a lot different than me. He would bring home, like, if it was Easter, he would bring home these little chicks, and a big Easter bunny that, this huge, like, you could stand tall, chocolate for them. And, so they saw sides of him that I didn't witness, because I was already living in New Jersey. And at the time, I was only 6 months when we moved to New Jersey. And he only stayed out here another year and then moved back to the city. So I saw him as, like, it would have been as if, two divorced people. I would see him on a weekend, or we would go down during the week and have, one night we'd have dinner with him or something like that. And there was a part of me that feared him, because I was very perceptive growing up. I was kind of like the eyes and the the eyes and the ears of the family. I came so much later on. I was watching things happen that I didn't understand. And the work I do now, being a psychic and a medium, I had no idea when I was that young that I was what they called an empath, which is someone who could feel everything of someone else's. So I could pick up my mom's energy, my dad's energy, my sister. So anybody that had anxiety, I could pick that up, you know. I couldn't tell the difference between my own anxiety or somebody else's. So I would get glimpses of a dad, you know, and I knew he was different because I'd have friends and go to their homes, right, and see how their dad would interact with them. Then when I was with my dad, if I got maybe 10 words out of him, it was a lot, you
Wow.
know. So, but I was witnessing soft sides to him, just not all the time, or maybe the way my brothers and sisters did, you know. Because once he got really into that life, it really took over. It was a very very hard thing to move through for him because he had so many people that he was overseeing, and then another family, us, to have to watch out for, and all kinds of things. I can't even imagine the pressure of that, you know, which actually got me to see him in a different light. See, when I put myself in his shoes, in a sense, and looked at his life from, the eyes of him, then I had more compassion for him. I was able to see the sides of him that, I couldn't see before. I only saw the pain. But I, I I wholeheartedly wanted to forgive him for what he was doing to us, to my mother, you know, being in that life, because it destroys families. It doesn't help in any way. And people feel it's a glamorous life. Yeah, well, if if you're looking at money, if you're looking at and all of that stuff, it may seem glamorous, but it destroyed us. It really did.
And you know what? It's something you say that because you're very smart. You're a very intelligent woman. Uh, it does this. It destroys everyone's life. It destroys not only the individual's life, it destroys the family's life because it breaks
Right.
up the family. Whether that person is going to prison, whether that person is getting killed, you know what? There is no more family. You
Right.
sit down at the table and you have that, that father figure there. He's not there no more. And the same thing, with your father, he was a boss of a crime family. And you know what? That was his family, that crime family.
Right.
And but you know what? It's just amazing. I mean, Vincent the Chin, out of all the bosses, I mean, he is definitely a character for sure. But
It was.
what kind of food did he like?
When he was young, he liked everything. At some point, he was 300 pounds. So he loved, steak and hot dogs and all kinds of stuff. But he had rheumatic fever when he was a baby, and so it affected his heart. And at some point, he could not eat that way anymore. So then, most people don't know this, but my dad was very OCD. So you know when he had to change his food, he ate. He was regimented. It was, you know, fish, and of course he'd have either my mother made it, or somebody else on the outside made it, or one of his guys who knew how to cook. And I remember it was oatmeal. It was a lot of the same stuff all the time. It was oatmeal, it was yogurt, um, some cereals, but good ones. Uh, if he had steak, it was buffalo, and he would have it brought in. If he had fish, it was, salmon, it was swordfish, it was all good stuff, vegetables and rice and brown rice, and you know. And then my mother would love to make him apple pies because he loved her apple pie, so, or her cookies or something like that. But it was all, and he lost a ton of weight. He had to get a heart operation, so he had to have a pig valve put in. He was strong. He was a strong man, so he survived a lot. He would have survived even probably he would have came out if they didn't do what they did to him in jail. So
Now, how old was he when he passed away?
he was 77.
77. Pretty young, right?
Yeah,
That's
young.
pretty young. Uh, when did you realize, like, your father, like, he was a powerful guy?
I think I knew all through my childhood that he was different and that people worked for him, we'll say. But I didn't know exactly what that meant because I would witness, people coming and sitting at my grandmother's table. And all of a sudden, the phone was always off the hook because the phone never got used. But the radio went on, the TV went on in the background, and it was always cartoons. And then there would be these, whispers. There would be papers back and forth to each other. These conversations that, you didn't know what they meant. Everything was, hush hush. The drapes were always drawn, so you couldn't tell if it was daytime or nighttime. But I'd have my ear on cartoons. The other ear was on what was going on here, and I was like, what is this like? And then all of a sudden I'd see the papers get ripped up, and he'd tell the guy, burn them, flush them down the toilet, whatever it was. And that was the end of that. Everybody would get up, they got their orders, and they would leave. Now, I didn't know that until I was 16, to be honest. You grow up in a house where you're always hearing, it's like those monkeys, you don't say anything, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, right? So you grow up like that. And then you realize you're not supposed to ask questions either. So I never asked questions. I just kind of let it happen, And there was the piece of me that was afraid to ask anything because I didn't know what any of it meant, So nobody was going to explain it to me, I was young, 8, 10 years old. And so in high school, there was a lot of rumors going around in high school. And I was 16, and this one girl was, she would call me the mafia princess. She would call me all kinds of things. And I had it one day with this girl, and I regret it today, but I really beat the shit out of her because I didn't want anybody talking about my family, but then I went to a family friend who kind of confirmed everything for me, thinking I knew already, and then she called my mother and she said, she's coming home and she knows, you better talk to her. And then when I got home, it was, okay, this is what it is. And if anybody asks, your daddy's sick. All right, what does he have? His heart. And then there was the whole crazy act. So then it was, he was paranoid schizophrenic. I'm like, the fuck?
That must have been scary, huh?
Oh my God. Because now I'm looking in books because I grew up, I had my first anxiety attack at 5. I had my first panic attack at 8 years old. And then OCD kicked in around 10, 11, because I grew up in this family that everything was a secret. There was no truths. There was always a tale being told, and I didn't understand why my mother was suffering the way she was, with her own anxiety, with her own, because that's not what my mother, married into, we'll say. She had no idea. It was later on that she realized. And then she loved my father. I mean, really, truly loved him unconditionally. And so she remembers the boy, the 12-year-old boy. I mean, they grew up together. My grandmothers knew each other. They were babies on the roof playing together, you know what I mean, in the city. So they knew each other from babies on. So my mother would always see him as that 12-year-old, that innocent boy. And he was. So, she married him, and she was going to stick with him right to the end. But she struggled. She struggled with it, coming from where she came from, which was a very, very, low key. And again, they all grew up poor. So, they're running around with holes in their shoes, and my other grandmother and grandfather, and they had 6, 7 kids. And, they were the light pretty much of the family. You know what I'm saying? Like they were the ones that liked to party and dance and, have fun. And in my father's world, it was very dark, So I'm grateful that I had that, my mother's family growing up, because I don't know what would have happened.
Now your father, I heard a story. I was talking to you for a little while. You said, now your father, as we know, the Genovese family never really took a big pinch.
Right.
All these other crime families took big pinches, but the Genovese, they might have pinched maybe one or two of them, maybe three of them like that. And your father, I don't think he was ever on a tape, you know.
No,
So the thing is, did he ever touch your phone?
never. 40 years.
He never
40
touched.
years. Never.
Wow, that's
Never had a conversation with him until he was in jail. The last time he was in jail when he passed. That was the only time I ever heard my father talk on the phone or hear his voice on the phone. Never seen him pick up a phone.
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That
I don't even know how, like, I think about today where we're running around with our phones like, strapped to us because, we have to get in touch with people. I mean, this and that, it's business and all that. Back then, almost missed that time, like you had those phones where I know in my mother's house, you could pick up the phone. The fucking wire was like 20 feet long. You can go around the house with it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Today, so different.
Now, there's a lot of stories on your father, all these TV shows. I don't know if you ever watched The Godfather of Harlem.
I did not. There were a lot of untruths in that storyline. And I think one of my family members, I believe, saw one episode and they said, wow, they really botched this. This was like horrendous. And I said, I'm not even gonna, I don't watch things like that anyway. So I said, I'm not even gonna bother. And that was the end of that. It was just like, they really did a shitty job, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, right away, someone portrays Vincent the Chin, and you're gonna grow an audience.
Right.
People are fascinated with him. They're intrigued to,
Sure.
someone play him. But all right, so I want to talk about you.
Sure.
Right? You wrote this book, The Godfather's Daughter. Tell me a little about this book.
This was a way for me to unleash my burden. This was a way for me to tell my story to the masses and explain to them how I came to the point of, this very sickly child, a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic. I was sick all the way through my teens up into my mid 20s because on top of my father being who he is, now he has a gay daughter, and there's a piece of him that knows it and is devastated. And there's a piece of him that, doesn't want to look at it because it would be a disgrace, and then there's that other piece of, well, you're going to hell because that's the Catholic end of it, and I think my mother more than anything was afraid of my soul, than more than anything else. But he never confronted me, so to speak, but I did come out to him when I was 19. And his reaction made me jump right back in because it wasn't one of rage. He got really quiet. And he was like, you're just going through a phase. A lot of people go through these phases and this and that. And all of a sudden, I got the lump in my throat. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. And I just kind of agreed with him. And I said, you know what? You're right. I said, I just haven't found my way yet, kind of thing. Jumped right back in the closet till I was 24. But because I wasn't living my truth, I was getting sick, physically ill. And at 24, I said to my mother, finally, I said, listen, I love you. I said, but this is who I am. I said, and I know you love me, and I know you would do anything for me, and you accept me. I said, I can tell you now, I'm not going to hell. I already know it. I said, and this is, and she says, we're just not going to tell your father. Okay, I said, whatever. Whatever you want, I'm in agreement with. Now, I have these conversations I speak to my dad all the time because I'm a medium. And I'm a psychic.
Yeah, I was going to get into that. Go ahead. Explain that.
So I had no idea I was a medium. I was always a psychic and a healer. I had no idea I was a medium until my father passed. And the night he passed, well, it was during the night, I want to say. He passed. That morning, we got the phone call. And within 5 minutes, I was on the phone with one of my friends that was a medium. And I said to her, my dad just passed. Can you? She goes, he's already here. I was like, oh my God. Now, his presence, you thought it was big here, right? In the spirit world, he was like a bull in a china shop. He came flying through, and he was, I mean, one thing after another about my mother, about me, about how much he loved me, and to forgive him because he was, he wasn't in his soul or spirit self when he was here. He was in his ego. And I knew this. I knew this because before my father died, I wrote him a letter of forgiveness, and I made it right between me and him. When I sent it, I had no expectations of a return, anything. And my mother gets a phone call. Now he has no idea I'm not living home. He has no idea I had moved in with somebody, clueless. But he calls my mother and he asked for me to get on the phone. And of course I wasn't there. And he said to her, you tell Rita that I understand everything and thank you, and that I love her. And it's like it crossed every boundary. He was changed before he left this life. He was a changed energy, a changed man. And it felt wonderful to unleash that and make amends with him. And the book will show you how from a very young child witnessing things that I shouldn't have witnessed, right up into the time, he dies and I get engaged at that point. You see me come full circle and heal. You see him come full circle and heal. And that is the story I needed to tell to help people to understand that you can forgive, you can move forward, and the things that happen to you in life do not define you. You define you.
That's beautiful.
So I had this, this all this information and things that I wanted to share with people, and then I did it. In 2012 the book was published, and I was out there for a little bit, and then stuff happens. So here I am today, and still helping people with my readings. My father comes into my readings, especially if I'm dealing with people in this life, or they were in this life, or they're trying to get away from the life, or whatever it is. He will come in with information for them. It really is a beautiful journey with him now. I've had more conversations with him in the time he's been gone than I had in the time that he was alive, and I saw him. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
That's beautiful. Rita, so
Yeah.
you're a medium, a psychic. Tell the people out there, if they wanted to get a reading by you, how do they go about it?
Honestly, the quickest way you could get me is to text me. My cell is, like I said, attached to the hip because it's my phone for work. And, you can go to my website, ritagigante.net. All my information is on there. I have a Facebook page that they can look me up. It's Rita Gigante, author. So they can see the book on there with me, and they can get me that way. Instagram, I'm on Instagram. But I always tell people the quickest way to get me is to text me or email, which is
That would
Rita.
be ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com.
Exactly.
So ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com. So if you want to contact Rita, she has The Godfather's Daughter. If you're looking to pick up that book, you could email her. If you want a reading by her, You could email her and she'll discuss it with you some way, I guess, through an email. And
Sure. I'd be happy to even sign books if anybody wanted me to, sign a book for them.
there you go. And she's willing to sign books. So, guys, if you want to contact her, that's the best way to contact her is Ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com, the Godfather's daughter. Now, also, did your father ever say "I love you"?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had I never experienced this before. But my dad was big about kissing on the lips, and he would tell me he loves me. And, what I remember the most about him was he would rub my back when he didn't know how to handle my anxiety. So with me, it was like kick gloves, you know what I mean? Because he was, he felt bad, because I had this consistent anxiousness about me, and I was sick a lot. So he would rub my back and I would fall asleep. He had the greatest hands, my dad, very soft, very gentle. And so that I remember very clearly about him. There were times where, because I really was the class clown and I was a big jokester. So, I would be at my grandmother's apartment and I would dress in her clothes and, make like I was my grandmother and, get him up. He loved Elvis Presley. So if we had Elvis on in the background, I would make him get up in his boxer shorts and t-shirt. And I tell him, come on, show me how to, he had two left feet. He couldn't dance for shit. But my mother was a phenomenal dancer and a phenomenal singer. And so if they went out, which they would, when they were young, to the Copacabana, whatever, he would tell his friends, go dance with her, my mother, because she loved to dance. But he would get up and he'd do a little shuffle for me, and he'd smile and he'd laugh. And you could see everything just come down. It was just like, well, there's my dad. Okay, now I know I have like a dad, and then maybe a minute later, he'd go back into his, I call it like a routine or something, because he was constantly on, everything had to be on. He'd crack me up anytime, a doctor would come and sit at in my grandmother's apartment and ask him questions. And, he can turn that craziness on and off quickly, so there'd be, cartoons in the background, and here's my father like imitating the cartoons to the doctor, and my grandmother's, in the background yelling, get him his medicine in Italian, Pia Medicine, Pia Medicine, he's, like he's losing it, It took everything, not to crack up, but, I put my head underneath the table or I'd walk away and I'd be hysterical because I knew, I knew what was going on. I knew what he was doing. Now, every so often, he would check himself into St. Vincent's Hospital up in Harrison, New York. I got to say that was probably the hardest piece for me to swallow, and also the hardest thing to go into a place like that, knowing what I knew, So I would go there, and I'd see these people. He was on the third floor, which was where, the people that had paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar, all kinds of really severe things. And I'd go up there and I'd watch these people, and I'm like, I feel like we're just making a mockery of these people. These are people who are really ill. He's sitting in the bed and someone comes in and gives him pills, and he'd show them that he took the pills. They'd leave the room. He'd spit the pills out, give it to my mother, go home and flush them, And I'd be like, what the hell? So it was very hard for me to walk into these places knowing what I knew, I'd have to say that was the hardest for me. The rest of there were other things that were hard, but that was a hard one for me to swallow.
How about, did he like to read?
So funny, he wasn't school smart. So he would read a newspaper, and if he didn't understand the word, he'd ask my sister, what does this mean?
Wow.
So he wasn't school smart.
Wow.
He was street smart.
Absolutely.
Could he have been a CEO of any company? 150%. He was so smart in that sense. But he wasn't smart in any other sense, so to speak, or book smart, we'll say. You
Now,
know.
I read a story uh, that he had a conversation one time, and one guy was bragging that he was Sicilian, and he was very proud of his heritage, your father.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And like he told him, well, I'm Napolitan, and he got into him.
Yeah, yeah, he was very, very proud. It's funny how the Italians, the Spanish, you know, they all feel wherever they come from is the better place, you know. So my father felt like that. He came from Naples. That's what he loved. The food was the best. Everything was the best, you know. So if you were Sicilian, if you were Calabrese, you were hot headed, you were thick headed, you know. The one thing about me is I love everybody, so it didn't matter. You know, I didn't care. I was friends with everybody in school. I didn't have cliques. I didn't like cliques. You know, I didn't care if you were white, black, Spanish. It didn't matter. And he couldn't stand that about me, but it's just who I was. You know.
Yes. And so, what'd you feel about the robe?
Oh, I have his robe.
You have his robe?
I do.
Oh
I
my!
have my father's stuff, and
Wow.
um, I plan on hopefully using that if someone would like to pick this up and make it. Um, I see it more as a series than I do a movie. But yeah, I have his stuff, and you know, growing up, and of course, I know him more as being in a robe than I know him being in street clothes. So growing up, he'd say to me, you know, when I was old enough, he'd say to me, "Come on, let's walk," and I'd walk him to his cafe, we'll say, right? And he'd say to me, you know, so all of a sudden he'd get into character, you know, he'd start messing his hair up and, or he'd have his cap on, his, what do you call
P-cap?
it? P-cap. And I'd pull it down, you know, and he'd always walk with his head down or hunched over with the robe on, always open so that people could see his pajamas. You know, and he would shuffle like, you know, well, you know, because you've seen the tapes, you know, like if they taped him on the street, and there I am, like he's like 6 feet tall, I'm like all of 5 fucking 1, you know what I'm saying? And he's telling me, hold my arm, like you're helping me, and I'm thinking to myself, who's going to believe that I'm helping him? You know what I mean? I'm like 5'1", he's like 6 feet tall, and then there are people coming like down the street, and they'd either like look at him like he was nuts or like almost like revere him. There was two types of people, you know what I mean? So the daughter in me would say to the people that would look like it's fucking crazy. I'd be like, mind your own fucking business, you know, like to myself, like keep walking, right? And then the other piece of me would go, Jesus Christ, I can't even believe I'm doing this, walking with him. And he'd stop, he'd talk to the parking meter, he'd talk to the hydrant, you know, God told me, you know, all of this stuff. And I just shake my head and go, you can't make this shit up. I'm thinking to myself, you just can't, you know.
Hey, I tell you, smart guy.
But listen, that's what he did best. He knew how to, he knew how to stay where he was on top. He was a very fair person, I could tell you, knowing his character. You know, and he was kind of the last of the Mohegans, we'll say, when it came to how you do things in that life. There was a code of ethics as far as he was concerned, and you don't breach that code. You stick to that code. And so he was fair with people. And the other thing I loved about him is he would take care of the neighborhood. So, and there was no one in that neighborhood, especially the elderly, because he had an affinity for the elderly, that would be starving. There were no kids that would go starving. You know, he made sure everybody had what they needed. If he heard of somebody that needed, rest assured he did it. So those are the things that I loved about him. We're all generous that way, me and my siblings, all generous that way. We get that from my mother too, because my mother was not, she was a woman of substance as far as I'm concerned. She was very, very, she had no airs about her at all. never wore jewelry, didn't really care for it. Just wanted to be a mother and his wife. Simple, very simple. She did not, and she did not speak um, in that voice, like a lot of those women, they had that accent, they had that heavy. My mother was very refined. So she was different. She came from a good family. And so, yeah, what else can I tell you about him? I mean, whatever you want to know.
How about what do you think? How do you feel about drugs?
Drugs. Oh my God, no. Um, I, I mean, if they're prescribed, that's one thing. If someone needs them, but drugs themselves, my father never liked that arena either. He wasn't. He didn't want that. Want that on the street. He didn't want that for anybody.
Hmm.
And he didn't want that life for my brothers either. He didn't.
Hmm. Wow. And
I'd like to thank everybody. I see that they're putting up stuff
oh yeah,
already.
they love you in the chat.
Yeah, I
They
see that.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you,
you so
Rita.
much. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I told you you're gonna be this is a big one today.
Yeah.
But listen, I really appreciate you coming on today, and the little conversation I had with you earlier. I could tell how much integrity you have and how classy you are, and
Thank you.
I appreciate this interview very much. I'm sure you
Uh,
know.
it's a pleasure.
Yeah,
Really is. It was such a pleasure, just meeting you, Jimmy. I mean, I had no idea, that you had this station. I had no idea that you were helping so many people, and I'm grateful that I'm able to connect to it.
and that's the thing, like I'm all for redemption. I have a little past behind me. I'm trying to make my crooked past every day of my life. When you're a kid, you do stupid things. Then you get older and you
Of
realize,
course.
what? How can I fix my life? I got to go forward. I got 2 kids now. I got an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old. I got to be a father figure to them, and I got
Sure.
to, make these kids, grow up and be good human beings.
That's it. That's it. And for all that we've been through, we've all turned out good human beings. I have to say, between him and my mother and my grandmother was a big, big part of this. My grandfather died young, so my grandmother was a very big part of this. His mother, my mother's mother, she died fairly young, like 77. And I only remember her. Um, I was only 4 years old when she passed, but I do remember her, and every so often I smell her, so I know that she's around. So somebody's asking if I ever met Vito. I'm way too young to have met Vito. Vito was long gone by the time, I came around. So I was one of those surprise, I'm here babies.
Yeah. And I tell you, you know what? That's your father's something else, man. Just to have Vito Genovese as his alibi, growing up, and your father's a monster. You know what I mean? I mean, in a good way. I know that life. Uh, it's not a good life, like you said. It's not
Yeah,
a good life. It destroys a lot of families, and a certain way about that life where what? There's a lot of things you have to live by, and at the end, I think it's a sad life. But
it is.
we have 500 people in the chat right now.
Ah, that's
500 people.
wonderful.
So
I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody had.
yeah. So you have any questions for Rita? Put them in the chat. I'll throw them out there. She'll answer your question. And also, pick up her book, The Godfather's Daughter. You could order it through her email. Her email is Ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com. And she'll sign it for you. And if you want a reading from her, you can contact her and she'll reach out to you. So,
Sure.
something that's pretty interesting. I probably am going to contact you, and I
Yeah,
want a reading too by you.
that's great. I would love to do that, Jimmy. I know you're not that far from me, so
Yeah, I'm not that far from you.
it's awesome.
Yeah, but if you have any questions out there, put them in the chat.
Don't be afraid.
See here,
maybe people feel, you know, a little strange asking questions.
How about this one? These are funny ones. Rita, did you ever know Fat Tony?
I know the name. The guys that I knew back in the day, you know, and everybody had nicknames, right? There was Little Larry. There was let's see, Frankie O'Bots. There was 100 Doms, you know, Fat Dom, Quiet Dom. You know, like there was so many of them, and such, you know, we loved them because they were so good to us. They were just, you know, good people. Um, they're they were like family. They were around all the time. So there wasn't a time where I didn't see one of them, you know. Um, and you got to love the names. I mean, really, it's funny if you think about it. Uh,
Absolutely. I know.
so
So, I mean, how was it? Look, I grew up in Brooklyn all my life. How was it growing up on Sullivan Street? I mean, my father used to live downtown on Van Dam Street, and I used to pass by Sullivan Street all the time from Prince Street. I used to get off on Prince Street and Broadway, and then walk down to Van Dam and Hudson, where he
yeah,
was living. And I used to pass by Sullivan Street. I might have passed by a couple of times. Your father's club. I might have saw him one time playing solitaire or something by himself, you know.
yeah,
But I mean, how was it living in Manhattan? Because I love Manhattan. Like my father introduced me to Manhattan because that's where he went from Brooklyn. When him and my mother separated, he moved to Manhattan. And when I was
right,
in Manhattan, I felt like I was a movie star in Manhattan.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's a totally different world than Brooklyn.
right, right. Yes, it is. It's definitely. But I got to tell you, you know, when you're not really allowed to go more than 4 blocks, it's not much for me to compare, you know. Um, but when we had the feast of Saint Anthony,
The feast, the St. Anthony, and you got the church
yeah,
over there.
what's
Uh,
that?
and you have the church over there.
The church over there, yeah. So when my dad had the feast and we were running, you know, the stands and all that, that was a lot of fun. It really was. But you know, it was very rare that if I think I went around the corner, I was allowed on Thompson, Bleecker, and Sullivan. That was about it. And only McDougal, you know, if we all went together as a family to Joe's restaurant, you know. So there was it's not much for me to compare. I loved going to the cafe because that's where he would be, you know. So me and my cousins would go in sometimes, and there's always, you know, there were always bottles of Coca-Cola or Manhattan specials and some pastries, and we'd sit and we'd play gin rummy, you know, and have a Coke and some pastries and stuff. And it was those times were really, really cool. I had cousins there, so I could hang with my cousins. And there was the park. What was the Morosini Club? There was the Morosini Club that we would hang out in. So those were good times. Those were good times. And 4th of July was fabulous because Thompson Street, they lined up the tables by Arturo's. We had pizza the whole night, and the fireworks were going off, you know, St. Anthony's, and it was a lot of fun. So there were good times, you know, there were definitely good times.
Yeah,
So
that's
I don't want people to think there were never good times.
And so, what else is in this book?
It's my whole story. So you'll see excerpts of things that I experienced as a kid that nobody would really know, and how it affected me or traumatized me, and why I had the anxiety, depression, panic attacks, all of that. Um, you'll hear stories about my father and me, my mother, and how that whole thing played out, um, and how I came to become the healer, the psychic, the medium, and how it went full circle with my dad. And you know, it's a quick read. Most people say they put it down because they don't want it to finish. They want to know if I'm going to create another book. So that I love because that's what you want to hear. You know, we couldn't put it down. We didn't want it to finish, so we put it down. But you know, then we wanted more. We wanted to know what else happened. So that's nice to know. And who knows? I may have another book in me. Certainly
What,
thinking about it.
what was Christmas like in the Gigante home?
Christmas. Christmas, well, in my grandmother's apartment, it was a very small tree. And then she would, make all her favorites as far as what she cooked, right? So there was always the fishes. It was fish for Christmas, a lasagna, and all her, she called, they were called flops. She'd make flops. These were the sweet things that she would make, or strufala. Um, and in my house there was two trees in my house in Old Japan, and my mother would make it really a big deal, and my favorite Christmas was when I got my chopper. I got a bike. It was like a real chopper with the wheel was long, and the steering wheel was like a real steering wheel, and I was a tomboy, so if they gave me a doll, I put it to the side. If you gave me a football, I went outside and I was like for the whole day, you couldn't stop me.
Really?
Sports actually saved me, to be
Wow.
honest with you, because I could play softball, baseball, football, any sport you put in front of me, I could do.
So you're
Um,
so you're a tomboy.
oh, completely.
Well, that's cool.
I couldn't. I hated dresses. They wanted to dress me in dresses, and I just, put me in pants and let me go. I just wanted to go. Got a drum set one year. I was like, fucking, this is awesome. I think I broke it over the weekend, but I played my ass off.
That's cool.
So it was a lot of fun. But we went there to see him on Christmas. He didn't come out here. So it was and he had a, I want to say, Dad was more depressed than he was in a good mood. He wasn't always in a great or good mood. So we always were like, okay, what are we walking into? It was hard. We couldn't decipher, but normally we knew it wasn't going to be that great. But we went for my grandmother, and we, of course, we wanted to see him, but it was not easy. Holidays weren't the easiest. When we were home, it was fine. you know so he would come and visit in New Jersey a little bit, but not very often, and he was in and out in 24 hours.
How much did he love his mother?
Oh, forget about it. My grandmother was everything. He was a bit of a jealous one, my father, because anytime she would speak highly of the other kids, he'd be like, yeah, he'd get a little upset, and because he wanted to be number one. He lived with her his whole life. you know she was part she was part of the ruse, which she had to be. And if one thing we know we have in this family is loyalty. So right down to her, but she hated the life, and she made sure she was the only one who could tell him how she felt, and she told him on no uncertain terms. So
When he went away, how did it affect you?
you know, at that point in my life, I took control of my life. So I saw him once when he went away, and I saw him in North Carolina, and I didn't like going. Not so much because of my father, but I didn't like seeing him like that in this kind of place, even though I knew eventually that would be the inevitable, or someone would kill him. But I wasn't, it was more that I thought he was going to jail than anything. So I didn't like the experience of going. And I'm not a good flyer, so I didn't fly. And he was in Missouri. The last stop was Missouri. So my mother would go every other weekend with a family member, and it was taking a real toll on her. She was a year younger than my dad. So when he died, she was 76. And it was hard. It was not an easy life. Not an easy life for her. So watching her was hard for me. because I was extremely close to her. She was probably the closest to me out of anybody, because I was the last. I lived with her the longest, and we had a great connection, you know. So to watch her hurt, I hurt. And because I can pick up other people's feelings and things, it was devastating for me to watch her. And the last 3 years of her life was not easy. So, but he actually went fast when he passed. His lungs filled up with water, and within a half a minute, he was gone.
No.
So I was grateful for that for him. He didn't suffer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
There's so much more, Jimmy. I mean, we could be here for hours, I have to tell you.
No, I know it. And the thing is, look, I'm not going to keep you on here forever. You know, I'm going to get a couple more minutes with you, but I just want to plug your book again, The Godfather's Daughter. I mean, you can reach out to Rita through her email. Again, I'm going to say it, ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com. I mean, just send her an email. She'll, reach out back to you. And also, if you want a reading, you can contact her and she'll set up something,
Yeah.
whoever contacts you, make sure you screen them.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just letting you know, make sure you screen them. Okay.
I'll ask them if they know Jimmy.
Well, you know what? Well, you can meet them with me.
All right.
Right.
Good enough.
I want to make sure. I want to make sure you're safe.
Yeah.
But Rita, listen, I
Yeah.
really appreciate this interview so much. Okay.
Oh, it was a pleasure, hon. It really was such a pleasure to meet you and be able to, talk to so many people. Thank you all for coming on.
We have 546 people in the chat.
Wow.
I tell you, that's a big number.
Yeah, for being a surprise guest.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd love to come back anytime, hon.
And you have my number. Contact me anytime. You need anything I could do for you.
Same here.
And I'm definitely going to contact you because you have to send me a copy of the book.
Yes, of course, of course.
Signed copy.
Of course. I enjoyed this so much. So if we could ever do it again, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So guys, you have her email. You can reach out if you want a signed copy of her book. Contact her. If you want a reading, contact her. Rita Gigante, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are the best.
Thanks, love. I appreciate it.
You have integrity and you have class.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, honey. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, guys, Rita Gigante. So that was pretty cool. Vincent Gigante's daughter. I had conversations with her before we did this interview, and we were on the phone for a little while. She really is a class act, this woman. And, I reached out to her. I didn't know if she was going to give me an interview. She got back to me right away. And, we started talking. But I appreciate her so much. As you can see, she's a special person for sure. But I want to thank all you guys for coming on today. My moderators, Live and Let Live, Boston J. I'm Eddie G. Thanks for coming. Scott H. Paint the Printer. To all you people out there, Gaetano, Bracco, Trish Norman, Jennifer Ledette. Thank you all for coming in. Like I said, you could get her book at her email. That would be ritagigantepsychic@gmail.com. And if you want a reading, contact her. She'll also, give you a reading, But also understand it's not cheap, guys. It's not cheap. So to all you people out there, I love you guys. You guys are the best. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for supporting me. And like I said, you can reach out to me. If you got a business you want me to advertise, let me know. I'll advertise it on my platform. And I appreciate every one of you. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Chopping up tomorrow, Sunday. So I'll see you then, okay? Everyone have a great night. Bye-bye.